Ever get the feeling that someone is hiding a dark side? Like, your seemingly normal neighbor could be harboring a terrible secret.
Oh, absolutely. It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It is. And today's deep dive is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about the people around you.
Ooh, okay. I'm intrigued.
We're looking at the Charlie Brandt case based on Deadly Obsession, a true crime podcast episode. This story. Well, it starts with a hurricane, a seemingly perfect marriage, and ends in an absolute bloodbath, uncovering a truly chilling family secret.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack.
It is.
So where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with Charlie and Terry Brandt, a seemingly happy couple visiting Terry's niece, Michelle Jones, in Orlando.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. Hurricane Ivan hits. Michelle insists they stay with her. And, that weekend ends with a scene straight out of a horror movie.
Oh, no. What happened?
The police find Terry stabbed multiple times on the couch. Michelle, well, she's discovered in her bedroom, dismembered.
Oh, my gosh.
And to make things even more horrific, her heart had been removed.
That's just awful.
Then there's Charlie, found hanging in the garage. Seemed like an open and shut case of murder-suicide, right?
Yeah, it would appear that way.
It did, didn't it? But then comes a bombshell revelation from Charlie's sister, Angela, throwing the entire investigation for a loop. Turns out this wasn't Charlie's first experience with violence.
Oh, really? What do you mean?
At just 13 years old, he murdered his pregnant mother and shot his father.
13?
13 years old.
I mean, how do you even begin to process that?
I know, right? And to think he was never held criminally responsible because of his age.
Unbelievable. So what happened next? Did he face any consequences?
Well, the family decided to bury this horrific secret and move to Florida, hoping for a fresh start.
A fresh start.
Yeah.
After all that.
I know, it's hard to believe.
Well.
But Charlie underwent 3 psychological evaluations during this time.
And what did they find?
Well, none of the psychiatrists could actually pinpoint a specific mental illness. One even noted a disturbing lack of remorse, despite the horrific nature of his crimes.
Wow. So you have this unbelievably violent act in his past, and then decades of what seems like a normal life, marriage, friends, a job. It's almost impossible to comprehend.
It really is. Like, do we just chalk this up to a difficult childhood?
That's the big question, isn't it? How do we reconcile these two sides of Charlie Brandt? And what does it say about our ability to truly know the people in our lives?
It's a scary thought. Imagine being Michelle's parents, learning this about the man who had been like family for 17 years.
The betrayal, the anger. It must have been just devastating.
Absolutely.
And speaking of Michelle's parents, they were Bill and Mary Lou Jones, right?
Yeah, and they were understandably furious. They couldn't fathom how Charlie's father and sister could keep such a secret, especially from Terry.
Right. Keeping that information from Terry seems incredibly reckless, almost like setting her up for danger.
Exactly. What were they thinking?
It's impossible to know for sure. Maybe they genuinely believed Charlie had changed.
Or maybe.
Or maybe it was a misguided attempt to protect him, to give him a chance at a normal life.
Right. But it raises a crucial question. Would anything have been different if Terry had known?
It's a chilling thought.
It really is.
So, moving on from that for a moment, let's shift gears back to the investigation in the Florida Keys.
Okay, yeah. Police found Charlie and Terry's house meticulously boarded up, almost like he was trying to erase himself. What did they find inside?
Oh, well, the house itself gave a glimpse into Charlie's mind.
Really? Like what?
They found a large anatomy poster on his bedroom door, medical books, journals, even a newspaper clipping specifically about the human heart.
Hold on. The human heart.
Yeah, remember Michelle's heart was removed.
Yeah.
It's a detail that sends shivers down your spine.
More than just chilling. It's like he was studying the human body, putting that knowledge to use in the most horrific way imaginable.
Yeah, this goes beyond a typical murder-suicide.
Absolutely. And then there were the Victoria's Secret catalogs addressed to Charlie.
Oh,
Might seem insignificant, but it takes on a darker meaning when you consider that Charlie always referred to Michelle as Victoria's Secret, never by her real name.
oh wow, that's disturbing.
It really is. It speaks to a disturbing level of objectification, like an obsession.
Like she was a character in a fantasy, not a real person.
Exactly. And then investigators made a discovery that takes this case to a whole other level of disturbing. Charlie's online activity,
What did they find?
websites featuring death fantasies, necrophilia, and violence against women, like peering into the darkest recesses of his mind.
It's like they found the missing piece of the puzzle, the confirmation that something was terribly wrong.
Right.
Did this online activity influence his actions in any way?
That's the question. It's impossible to say for sure if these online spaces fueled his dark desires or if they were just a manifestation of a pre-existing darkness.
Right.
But the fact they existed at all paints a very unsettling picture.
Absolutely.
And it led investigators to ask a chilling question.
And that is.
Was Charlie a serial killer in the making? Were Michelle and Terry his only victims?
It's a scary thought, isn't it?
It is.
And what did the investigators find?
Well, the evidence suggests it's a very real possibility. The methodical nature of the murders, the focus on specific body parts, it points to a pattern, a signature.
So they started looking into cold cases.
They did, searching for anything matching Charlie's profile, and two cases in particular stood out.
Okay, let's hear about them.
All right. The first is the murder of Darlene Toller, a prostitute in Miami. Like Michelle, she was decapitated, her heart was removed, and her body was wrapped in a blanket with dog hairs on it.
Dog hairs? What did that have to do with Charlie?
Well, they also found dog hairs in Charlie's truck.
Oh.
And as if that wasn't compelling enough, mileage records from his truck place him in the Miami area around the time of the murder.
Okay, that's pretty damning evidence.
It is, isn't it?
So what's the second case?
This one hits even closer to home, geographically and relationally. It's the murder of Sherry Parashow back in 1989, just 4 blocks from Charlie's house in Big Pine Key.
Another horrific murder. What happened to her?
Well, her body was found decapitated, heart removed, and hooked to a fishing line under a bridge.
How was that connected to Charlie?
This is where the story takes a truly shocking turn. Remember Jim Graves, Charlie's former brother-in-law? Well, he revealed that Terry actually suspected Charlie's involvement in the Parashow murder.
What?
Yeah. She found blood on him shortly after the crime and even considered going to the police.
She suspected him but didn't say anything. Why on earth would she stay silent?
That's a question that might forever haunt this case. Was it fear? Denial?
Maybe a desperate attempt to save her marriage.
It's hard to say.
But her suspicions, along with the similarities between the murders and Charlie's proximity to the crime scene, were enough for police to officially close the Parashow case.
So we have a man who committed a truly unimaginable act of violence at 13, seemingly got away with it, built what appeared to be a normal life, and may very well be responsible for at least 2 other murders.
It's almost too much to process, isn't it?
It is.
This whole case just really makes you question everything you think you know about people.
It does. And sadly, we may never know the full extent of Charlie's crimes. But before we dive into that, let's pause here for a moment to let all of this sink in. We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the Charlie Brandt case. It's hard to even imagine the pain Michelle's parents must have felt, not just from losing their daughter in such a horrific way, but also grappling with the fact that the man they knew was capable of such darkness.
Absolutely, their world was shattered. Bill and Mary Lou Jones, they were left with a void that can never be filled and a haunting question. Like, what was the breaking point for Charlie? What drove him to kill his mother at 13? And then what ultimately led to this double murder-suicide all those years later?
Yeah, it's like a search for answers that might never come.
It is. It's like Charlie took those secrets to the grave with him. And that lack of closure, well, it just adds another layer of suffering for everyone he left behind.
It's just tragic. But amidst this tragedy, Michelle's parents have found a way to channel their grief into something positive. A fight for change. A push for greater transparency.
You're talking about their push for a public database of killers.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a pretty bold move. What exactly are they proposing?
Well, they're advocating for a database similar to sex offender registries, but this one would include anyone who has ever killed another person, regardless of age or legal outcome.
So, like, even juveniles.
Even juveniles.
That's a huge undertaking. How do they envision this working in practice? What's their reasoning behind it?
They believe it could prevent future tragedies.
How so?
Well, just imagine if someone had known about Charlie's past. Maybe, just maybe, Michelle and Terry would still be alive.
That's a heart-wrenching thought.
It is. It really highlights the potential impact of such a database.
So it's about transparency, giving people the information they need to protect themselves and their loved ones.
Exactly. But I can imagine there would be some serious pushback to an idea like this.
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely concerns about privacy, about unfairly labeling individuals, even about the potential for vigilantism.
Yeah. Is it fair to potentially stigmatize someone for life based on something they did as a minor, for example?
Right. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line between public safety and individual rights? How do we balance the need for accountability with the possibility of rehabilitation.
Right. It raises a lot of thorny ethical questions, but at the end of the day, the Jones family's goal is to prevent other families from experiencing the same pain and loss they endured.
And that's a goal we can all get behind. Their fight is a testament to the human spirit's resilience. Even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, they found the strength to turn their pain into a force for positive change.
It's incredibly inspiring. So we've got this twisted family history, a series of brutal murders, the chilling possibility of more victims out there, and a family fighting for justice in a way that could reshape how we approach violent crime. This story really does have it all.
And it's a story that reminds us that evil can wear many masks. Charlie Brandt, he was a seemingly ordinary man who managed to deceive everyone around him. It's a sobering thought that someone you might consider a friend or neighbor could be harboring such darkness.
It really makes you question your own judgment, like how well can we ever truly know someone?
It's a question that's haunted philosophers and storytellers for centuries. It's a fundamental human dilemma, and the Charlie Brandt case really brings it into sharp focus.
It does, and it forces us to confront this uncomfortable reality that even in the most seemingly normal lives, darkness can lurk beneath the surface.
This whole case has taken us on a roller coaster of emotions. Shock, horror, anger, sadness. It's a lot to digest. But beyond the emotional impact, this deep dive also compels us to grapple with some pretty profound questions. Questions about human nature, the nature of evil, the role of personal responsibility versus societal failings.
You're right, this isn't just some gruesome true crime story. This is a story that forces us to look inward and ask ourselves some tough questions about how we as individuals and as a society can do better, be better.
And perhaps most importantly, it's a story that highlights the enduring power of hope and resilience. Despite the unimaginable pain they've endured, Michelle's parents found the strength to turn their tragedy into a platform for positive change. That's a powerful message we can all take away from this.
It is. This deep dive has been emotionally draining, but also incredibly thought-provoking. It leaves us with so much to think about, so many questions to ponder.
Speaking of questions, I think it's time we turn to our expert for a final, thought-provoking question to leave our listener with. Something that builds on everything we've discussed, but goes a little deeper.
Okay, hit us with it. What's the question that's going to keep our listeners up at night?
All right, listener, here's something to ponder. What does this story tell us about the nature of evil? Is it something innate, like a darkness some people are just born with? Or is it a product of circumstance, of trauma, of a society that fails to address the root causes of violence?
Wow, that's a deep one. It really gets to the heart of what we've been exploring today. And honestly, there are no easy answers, are there?
No, not at all. But it's a question worth wrestling with. It can help us better understand not just the Charlie Brandt case, but the complexities of human nature and the challenges we face as a society.
It's a question that will definitely stay with me long after this deep dive is over. And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this journey into the darkness and the light of the human experience. It's amazing how one case, just one person, can make us question so much about human nature. We've gone from the initial shock of the crime to trying to understand how a 13-year-old could do something so horrific, and now we're grappling with the possibility that there might be even more victims out there.
And what's really disturbing is how easily he just blended in. Charlie Brandt was, from what everyone says, a totally normal guy, husband, friend, coworker. But under the surface, this undeniable darkness, this violence that's just, most people can't even imagine it.
Makes you wonder how many other Charlie Brandts are out there living seemingly normal lives, hiding these terrifying secrets.
It's a chilling thought, and it takes us back to that question we talked about before, nature versus nurture. Was Charlie Brandt always going to be violent, or did something happen, a lack of help, that turned him into the monster he became?
It's the big question. Are people born evil, or is it something that happens to them?
This case doesn't give us easy answers, but it definitely gives us a lot to think about. It challenges us to look beyond what we see on the surface, to realize that darkness can exist anywhere, even where you least expect it.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that we can never really know what's happening in someone else's mind. It doesn't matter how well we think we know them.
It really emphasizes how important mental health awareness and support are. Like, what if Charlie had gotten the help he needed after he killed his mother? Could all of this tragedy have been prevented?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it's a question that stays with you. It really shows how crucial early intervention is. A system that doesn't just punish, but also tries to, rehabilitate and understand why this violence happens in the first place.
Exactly. To prevent these kinds of tragedies, you need a multi-pronged approach, addressing societal issues, giving people access to mental health resources, and fostering a culture of, well, empathy and understanding.
It's a big goal, but it's something worth working towards. And if there's one thing we can learn from the Charlie Brandt case, it's that ignoring the warning signs, those red flags, can have devastating consequences.
Absolutely. It reminds us that we can't just sit back and do nothing. We have to be vigilant, to look out for each other, and to get help when we see signs of trouble.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've explored this twisted family history, looked at the gruesome details of these crimes, tried to understand what might have been going on in the mind of a killer. And, well, we've faced the fact that justice may never truly be served.
It's been a journey into the darkest parts of the human psyche, a reminder that the line between good and evil can be, well, blurry and crossed much easier than we think.
This whole case has made us question our assumptions, our judgments, and it leaves this feeling of unease that just kind of lingers.
But even with all the darkness, there's a little bit of hope, too. The Jones family, their commitment to turning their tragedy into something positive, to push for change, well, it shows how strong the human spirit can be.
Their fight for that public database, even though it's controversial, it gets people talking about important things like transparency, accountability, and finding that balance between keeping the public safe and protecting individual rights.
It's a conversation we need to have. And hopefully this deep dive has helped to, get that conversation started.
We've dug deep into the Charlie Brandt case, but we've also explored these bigger ideas: the nature of evil, mental health, the fight for justice, and the power of resilience.
It's a case that reflects so much of the human experience, our capacity for love and for unimaginable cruelty.
It's a story that will stay with us, making us question and think about how we can make the world a place where these tragedies are less likely to happen.
So, listener, as you go about your day, remember what we've talked about in this deep dive. Be aware, be empathetic, and be the change you want to see in the world.
Thanks for joining us as we explored the human condition. Until next time, keep those critical thinking skills sharp, and remember, there's always something more to discover, something hidden beneath the surface.